down the hall, a lamp that floats on the summer night, that you can never
I have 5 of my own, plus a foster, 10 cats, and any other animal you can imagine. And she was also a big animal advocate in her later years, so I feel a little bit of a connection to her. And this was one of the songs she made famous. It is a song called Sentimental Journey.
So that experiment.
gonna take a sentimental journey, gonna set my heart at ease, gonna take a sentimental journey to renew old memories. Got my bag, I got my reservation, spent each dime I could afford. Like a child in wild anticipation, I long to hear that call of call. 7, that's the time of me. At 7, I'll be waiting up in heaven, counting every mile of railroad track that takes me back. Never thought my heart could be so yearning. Why did I decide to roam? Gonna take a sentimental journey home. 7, that's the time for me. At 7, I'll be waiting up in heaven, counting every mile of railroad track that takes me back. Never thought my heart could be so yearning. Why did I decide to roam? Gonna take a sentimental journey home. Sentimental journey home. Thank you very much. I wanted to let you know also that over at the Blue and White Tent, they're selling the Low Tote t-shirts and some other swag, as well as the programs. And if you're watching on Flying TV and you're thinking, gosh, there's an awful lot of stuff they're selling here that I can't get, maybe this is the impetus that you need to plan your trip to Oshkosh next year and take your own sentimental journey through the Warbirds and Review, where we look at all these planes and get a deep dive into the pilots and the stores and the plane itself. I would encourage you, if you've never been, to start making your plans, because it's a lot more fun if you come live. This next song is a ballad that was actually recorded for the first time in World War II by Glenn Miller. And it was a pretty popular song, but it didn't get its real popularity until later on when an amazing singer named Etta James recorded it. This is a song called At Last. And gentlemen, if you brought your wife here and she's not all that big into planes, this is your chance to hold her hand and make her feel like their shows are really romantic. So this is At Last. At last. Thank you so much. So my last little PSA for you is regarding flyingtv.com. If you are an aviation fanatic and you are interested in seeing warbirds more and airplanes more than just once a year, then you may want to check out the coupon that they've got over at the tent over there. That is going to give you 20% off. It's their Oshkosh Summer of Fun special. You get 20% off for your first year subscription, and it's 700 different shows, and it's every type of airplane you can imagine. Plus, you can come back and see all of these warbirds in review from this year. And I talked to a guy yesterday when I was trying to give him my sales pitch. He goes, "Don't worry, I already have it." And he said, "It's the best thing that I've ever gotten." It entertains him all day long. Ladies, if you're looking for the perfect gift for your husband that doesn't take any more space in his airplane memorabilia collection, this subscription might be the perfect birthday gift, Christmas gift, whatever it is that you want to do. So if you go over, you can grab the coupon. If you're not here, you're watching online, the coupon code is OSH 2019, and OSH is in small letters. I have one more song for you. This is a song that was recorded by the Andrews sisters, and it's on my CD, which you can grab from me over there later today. And I think it's one that you'll all recognize. It's the most danceable of the songs I sing. This is Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy. I would ask you to take over.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Teresa. Well, we were just a couple of minutes going, oh, is that her last song? Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Connie Boland, president of EA Warbirds of America, but also the founder of Warbirds in Review. Had no idea that many years ago that we would end up with this kind of production. My thanks go to our sponsors, Scott's Miracle Grow Company, Jim Hagedorn, our very good friend who is greatly responsible for the financial support that allowed us to put the Eagle here that you see on Warbird Alley, and then to sponsor Warbirds in Review to the level allows us to have Sleeping Dog Productions produce this for us. David Hartman is our moderator. Also thank Ron and Diane Fagan of Fagan World War II Fighter Museum in Granite Falls, Minnesota. It's a place you really should go out of the way to visit. It's a terrific museum, terrific people. They are responsible for us having this beautiful Quonset hut, the facility that allows the production team to do what you will see here today. These beautiful aircraft, all the owners that support us bringing their aircraft and bringing the veterans here. My thanks to my many friends who own these airplanes. The veterans are all very special, and to all the volunteers who make this very wonderful program possible. This beautiful aircraft here, you enjoyed seeing a few pictures of it. So now, and of course the P-40 here, as you'll hear more about this story. The run of show, David Hartman will be out in just a few minutes with our guest, and then we'll have a question and answer session to cover the aircraft at the very end. But for now, I'd like for you to direct your attention to the Jumbotron for the video, for the intro for this very special program. Thanks for being here.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
Japan attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941, pulling the United States openly into World War II. Just 12 days later, on December 20th, 3 squadrons of Allied fighter airplanes saw their first combat in the CBI, the China, Burma, India Theater. The unit was called the 1st American Volunteer Group, better known as the Flying Tigers. Each squadron was assigned 30 aircraft, mostly P-40s, Navy Buffaloes, and later P-51 Mustangs, and some RAF aircraft too. Initially, they were based at either end of the Burma Road from China to Rangoon to destroy Japanese supplies and its bases in Burma. The pilots were all volunteers, mostly from aviation units from all the American military services. They flew with Chinese airplane markings under American control. The Flying Tigers gave the Allies hope in the early stages of the Pacific War, destroying 296 Japanese aircraft while losing only 14. Their first combat contact was on 20 December 1941, only 12 days after Pearl Harbor. 7 months later, in July 1942, the volunteer group was disbanded and replaced by the 23rd Fighter Group, U.S. Army Air Corps. One of the 23rd Fighter Group pilots scored 4 air victories in a P-40 and 1 in a P-51 Mustang. That made him an ace. He was born in Brooklyn in 1923 and scored his first air victory just 20 years later. He was highly decorated and flew 101 missions. His name is Don Lopez Sr. This is a story about this man and his commitment to his country, protecting its freedoms both in combat and in civilian life. After World War II, Lopez became a test pilot, then flew again in combat in Korea in the F-86. He earned a master's degree in aeronautical engineering, taught at the very young Air Force Academy, then worked on both the Apollo and Skylab programs. In 1972, he joined the National Air and Space Museum staff for 36 years, including many years as Deputy Director. An American patriot, retired Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Don Lopez, Sr. Morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm David Hartman. Welcome this morning. It's good to see you with us. Thank you very much. And please welcome our guests. At your far right, Warren Peach. Then, how we're switching.
Yeah, you're Chris. You're
Bruce
right,
Eads,
sorry.
Chris Brown right here from National Air and Space Museum. Bruce owns the airplane, and Warren's flown everything that was ever designed, I think. So, good morning, everybody. Warren Don Lopez, Sr. Tell us about this guy.
I had the privilege of getting to know Don because of a mutual acquaintance from where I'm from in Minot, North Dakota. There was a guy from Minot named Oswin Moose Elker who was in the same unit as Don, same training, did a lot of flying with Don in the CBI, China Burma India Theater. And we were building our museum up there, and we were doing another addition to things, and Moose had been part of our museum, brought in some artifacts, told some great stories, been a neat part of our history from our local area in Minot. And he mentioned Don Lopez, and I knew who Don Lopez was, obviously, but Don Lopez didn't know me from anybody. But I called him up on the phone, and I said, sir, this is Warren Peach, and we're in Minot, North Dakota, and we're dedicating a building to a guy that I think you know. His name is Oswin Moose, he said. And I said, yeah. He goes, when's the dedication? I'll be there. It was that quick, that simple, and he came up and he spent 3 days with us and dedicated the building to his friend. We had an air show with the Canadian Snowbirds. Don was a phenomenal speaker and started telling great stories. Well, that initiated an opportunity for me to get to know him, because at the time I was flying for a commercial carrier and would have layovers in Washington, and I would take every opportunity I had to go to Don's office. Never meet a more gracious man. Always had time to talk to you. Always treated you like you were the most important person around, and took the time to show me the progress in the Hazy Center that he was working on and the things they were doing, and he loved talking about airplanes. I mean, he was a lot of things, but he was a pilot at heart. And one of the things that I always thought was humorous about working with our dedication in Minot with Don was we were going to take a P-40 out, and we were going to use a Russian L-29 trainer, or a Czechoslovakian L-29 trainer that had been a Russian Air Force airplane, as a formation platform, so that we could take Don flying with a P-40, and he could fly formation with a P-40 again. Well, the P-40 overheated while we were taxiing out, so we ended up flying by ourselves in this jet. And here's where the true patriot comes out, because now Don's in a Russian airplane. He's a U.S. Air Force test pilot, and he was unimpressed with the fact that he was in this Russian airplane, right? I was like, Don, we can just go back and land if you want. No, he says, we're out here, why don't you go do something? I said, well, do you want to fly it? He said, no, not really. And I said, okay, well, we'll just go. No, I said, do something. So I did a roll, and I did a loop or something, a half Q and 8. He says, well, you know, I'm sure it's not much of an airplane, but you know, I'll fly it here for just a little bit. Let me fly it for a little bit. Well, he did everything I'd just done, only he did it a little better. And pretty soon he is in the back. He goes, you know, this thing, pretty nice airplane, flies pretty nice. And I think it was really hard for him to say that. It was kind of fun. Anyway, that's how I got to know Don Lopez.
When we looked at, just now on the screen and saw the pictures of him when he was flying in CBI, and he looked like he was 12 years old. I mean, how much training had he had before he got into a P-40?
Not that much. I don't know.
A lot less than that guy's head.
You know, I don't think any of our kids had the advantage of the advanced training that the enemy had on both sides, because obviously the Luftwaffe had been practicing for years in the 30s and involved in other skirmishes, and the Japanese had been doing the same. And the Zero was a formidable airplane with trained and experienced pilots, and our guys were going over with minimal training. And Chris just told the story that he said Don told you about. He was flying Cubs, and the first time he got in a P-40, he almost went out in the grass.
Yeah, Chris, go ahead, tell that.
Well, I mean, I think he had 40 hours in a Cub, and as mentioned, at 19 years of age, he's in the Chinese Burma Theater. And his first flight in a P-40, he went on to say later, he said, you know, I wasn't quite ready for the torque, I almost went off the runway. He was a quick learner. He fixed that problem.
Yeah.
So Warren, in your personal contact with him, what kind of stories can you said he was a storyteller.
Oh, he was a great storyteller. You know, and I think most everybody here that knows who Don Lopez was has seen the famous painting of Into the Teeth of the Tiger, where he's had a mid-air collision with a Zero during a dogfight, and it takes the wingtip off of the P-40 with the pitot tube gone, and it took the wing off the Zero, and the Zero crashed. And I remember asking Don about that, and he said, yeah, when I came back, they changed my name and they called me the Destroyer for a while. And he said, but you know, in that mission, he hit that Zero, and then he went on to join up with his lead and finish the mission, flying wing for his lead with the airplane, and that was his first confirmed kill of an enemy airplane. So I had a print, and I wanted him to sign it for me. He said, well, I already signed it. You know, it's already signed. And I said, yeah, but I'd kind of like to watch you sign it if you don't mind. So he wrote on there, we were low on ammunition, so I just winged him. And then he signed his name. But, you know, he had great stories. He told a lot of stories about our local guy, about Oswin Elker up there, and how funny Oswin was. One of the things that, if anybody's read the book, and if you haven't, I suggest you do. This is called Into the Teeth of the Tiger in the Smithsonian History of Aviation series. Don wrote this. It's got a lot of good stories in it. One of them is about 10 of the guys that had just gotten checked out in the CBI, and they were waiting to be assigned to their assignment. They didn't know for sure where they were going to go, and one of the commanders needed 10 L5 observer planes delivered from Karachi, from their base in Karachi in India. So as soon as he said, as soon as the airplanes were assembled, they got these 10 future fighter pilots, and they all got these airplanes. And one of them was Moose Elker from Minot, and another one was Don, and these other 8 people that were in there. Well, he says they were told specifically no flat-heading, no budget, you guys. We just need these airplanes delivered. He says as soon as they broke ground, they started buzzing their base, and it turned into this huge contest of who could be lower, and they were rolling their wheels on the ground. He said the streets are pretty wide, and so everybody's buzzing down here, and they got people laying on the ground and everything. And he said Moose, not to be outdone, flew underneath a set of high lines, rolled his wheels on the ground, jumped up over a volleyball net, put his wheels back in the ground, and jumped up over a backstop for a ball diamond or something in there and stuff. And in the end, he said he enjoyed it so much he did that 3 or 4 times until they were severely in trouble. And he said that so they got all this done, and it's a great little story in there. When they got all done, they were going to be court-martialed, but the people in China said, no, we need those guys, bring them over. So they said what they'd been waiting for was what they ended up getting for punishment. The commander thought he was doing them a great disfavor by sending them to China to go into combat, but he said that's what we were all wanted to do anyway. So that's how they got the assignment.
So that kind of thing goes on today a lot at jets, right?
Yeah.
I think it happens every once in a while. Every once in a while.
Bruce, you own this airplane, so where did that start? When did your interest begin?
Well, it started when I was a kid. I mean, I'm of the age, like a lot of you guys here, that grew up with fathers and friends whose fathers were all in World War II, and we're always waiting until those guys got together in the backyard around a barbecue, drinking beers and starting to talk, because that's the only time you'd hear their stories. And so, all the kids would kind of hide in the bushes and get that. So I grew up, building the airplane models and so on, and really being steeped in that history. And really being inspired by it. And it wasn't until years later, after years of going to air shows and walking through Warbird alleys and et cetera, that I got to the point where I could actually do something about it, and was really fascinated and motivated to not just be somebody trading warplanes, but somebody actually bringing them back to life. And so this project was, to me, just a penultimate project to do, because it was a phenomenal airplane, and one that a lot of people don't get to see, this type of model of airplane, but also because of its connection, Don's story to the CBI, which is another theater of the war that a lot of people just aren't as in tune to. And then, of course, a great story about a great patriot like Don, who sets just a phenomenal example. And so it was a done deal. I mean, this was the project.
So there's the history of the airplanes themselves, but there's also the human histories involved.
Absolutely. I mean, the planes are phenomenal. Let's face it, we all love Warbirds. There's something about that era of plane design and fighter planes that there's a certain special romance about them, and they were built out of need because of what we were facing in the world at the time. But they're machines. And so the things that make them come alive are the guys that actually came off the farms in 1939, 40, 41, started getting trained to fly these things in combat that bring them alive. And that's what really makes them special.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to add, David, that something I've come to appreciate in my relatively new role at the Smithsonian. I'm privileged to hold the position that Don did for many years, and in fact that print, the original, is right there in my office. It's wonderful. But something I've come to appreciate is that in addition, museum people, we call them artifacts. I know it's kind of hard for me, I still call them artifacts. But they really, to your point, Bruce, they really sit silent. As beautiful and as impactful as they are, it's really the stories and the people behind them that bring it to life. And I think what you've done so well, is to allow the artifact, the aircraft, to tell the story of a great American and the contributions that he made at a pivotal time in our country's history.
You know, Warren, you mentioned about, or one of you mentioned, how little we know about China, Burma, India, and what that means and what the theater was. Talk a little bit about CBI and what happened there and why it was so important just 10 or 12 days after Pearl Harbor.
Well, I think there's so many things involved in that story. You know, Don is a representative for a group of people who were fighting a war isolated from the rest of the world, but they were very involved in that war. And Don is obviously, you know, like I said, he was a representative for a lot of people in a lot of different facets. The guys driving the trucks, the guys fighting the ground war, and the people there, they weren't getting supplies, they weren't getting support, they didn't have very much oversight. They certainly weren't being criticized for how well shaven they were every day, I'm sure, but they also didn't have enough bullets and gas to fight the war. And so they were given minimal tools to do a maximum job. And I think they really came to do exactly what they would. I mean, it was a Herculean effort just to get fuel from India to China over the hump. Look how many, think about how many airplanes were lost and people lost just to get the supplies across there, and huge sacrifice in the Chinese population. Every time the Japanese would have some sort of defeat, they would take it out on the Chinese population. And you know, it's something that I think in today's politics we maybe forget that just a few decades ago we were working hand in hand with these people. They were out with their bare hands patching bomb craters and runways so that our airplanes could land to fight that war. And the CBI was, I think, an extremely brutal campaign for a lot of people. Not only in the fighting, but just the living conditions. When you think about the jungle and the disease and the poisonous snakes and what you had to go through to get through that country, it was really something. And yet these young guys, they found a way to have humor in it and to keep their spirits up and to be what a 19, 20-year-old young man or woman is. You know, they're going to have fun. No matter what, they're going to have some fun someplace. But it had to be a terrible experience in their life to be losing friends on a daily basis and these things, you know, and it gets back to, you know, talking about this airplane and the stories. I mean, this airplane is, I kind of look at it as a whole group of different passions colliding, and I've been involved in, very fortunately involved in aviation for most of my life, and there was that first couple months where I wasn't, but after that it was all pretty good. But you know, you've got the crew from Air Corps who put their heart and soul into making this airplane what it is, and you got Bruce who
Now, they're the guys who restored the airplane.
exactly, yeah,
Air
they're
Corps
sitting right
Aviation.
here, and
So identify the guys, would you? They're sitting
Well,
right there.
to the left of me here is Eric Holcuff and Eric Trueblood.
Eric.
Chuck Craven's the historian, and there's more Air Corps guys over here. I mean, it's a big crew, and they do a phenomenal job on these airplanes. Not
Yeah,
and
right.
again, and not just in the workmanship, but in the story.
They focus, that's why they've got a full-time historian
Yeah.
that really helps dig into the stories behind these planes.
You know,
Bruce and I got to go to their shop when Don Lopez Jr. and his daughter came and visited the airplane, and to see that moment in time, I wish they could be here. They're obviously, you know, Don Lopez Jr. is a very busy man and a professor and stuff, but it was really a neat thing to have them sit in the airplane where his father and grandfather would be able to look at the radio dials, the same things, and try to envision what their father was doing when he was 20 years old.
You know, interesting about comparing the aircraft, the metal and all, with the human story. The guys came to me this morning and said, concentrate on Don and the personal stories about the human beings. Yes, we did a good job with the airplane, but let's tell the stories about the guys. And for restorers to say that is really phenomenal. Thank you all for doing that. That was great. When Don flew one of these airplanes with his first 4 air victories, right?
Right.
What would it have been like to all of a sudden to be given a Mustang after flying this airplane?
Well, Don's checkout at a Mustang is a pretty interesting story too. Chris, are you familiar with it? Have you
Not
read
as
that?
much as you, but I want to tell the
So
story.
his first time to fly the airplane that ended up being painted like this airplane is painted was he went over to India, and there was brand new deliveries of P-51C sitting there, and he's looking at this airplane, and obviously had heard about it but hadn't seen one, and he wanted to fly it, so he looked for the senior officer on the base and realized he was the senior officer on the base at the time, so he signed the airplane out to himself and went out and tested it. And apparently the test flight didn't go as well as he hoped, because I believe the deal was he got it in a spin, or something happened, and he scared himself in the airplane pretty bad. But he got it recovered and got it back down again, and that airplane ended up being delivered to China and assigned to him, and so he ended up flying the airplane in combat. Yeah, and so the checkout was not what you would call a controlled environment.
Chris?
So as you know, his third airframe was Lopes-Ho third.
Yeah.
He had 2 airframes, P-40s, that he flew. And he was a very witty, funny guy, the way he would tell a story. Almost had like the Yogi Berra kind of delivery. But he made a point of saying, yeah, both of those P-40s were shot down, but I wasn't in them. But what he did do, and he related, is that in the course of flying in those P-40s, you know, I'm sure he had a little bit of time, he was hungry, so he got into the survival kits and ate all the chocolate bars. Well, fast forward, the next pilot is in the airframe, gets shot down, and goes to look for chocolate bars, and they're not there. And Don said that he gave him a lot of grief later for eating those chocolate bars.
What is, Chris, Smithsonian, what is its role when it comes to telling these stories?
Well, it's interesting. I would say a museum is sometimes thought of as a sort of repository of aircraft and artifacts, but we really see ourselves as storytellers. And I'm joined by Jeremy Kenny, our chief curator for aeronautics, and he would attest, he and his colleagues, what we do is try to bring the stories to life in a relevant and a contemporary way. And we have the unique position at the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum of being the custodians of some of the nation's most prominent and iconic aircraft and spacecraft. So how do we take those items, those artifacts, those amazing things, and put the stories to them to really give them the life? And so It's much more than just walking through a museum and looking at the aircraft. It's understanding who built it, who test flew it, who flew it, and now we're able to do it so that you can connect digitally into these stories. Because as we restore aircraft tonight, as I'm sure Eric did with this aircraft, we digitize the process so that you can virtually visit these aircraft and these stories. So we take our charge very seriously. The Smithsonian, very much like Bruce and his team, is all about accuracy and authenticity. And we live in an age where there's so much skepticism and this is fake and that is fake, but when you come to the Smithsonian, you see the Wright Flyer, you know that that's the original Wright Flyer. And so when Eric and the team built this, they know that it was built to the exact standards and techniques and can speak to its accurate authenticity. So we have a great deal in common.
Bruce, you fly this airplane, yes?
No, I haven't gotten checked out of this thing. I wouldn't want to scratch it.
So what's the next step in continuing the stories of Don Lopez? When we think about, first of all, we saw in the film, first of all, Air Force test pilot, combat, Korea, etc. But then move on to this time at Air and Space, going back to 1972, before it was even open.
Yeah, I think the video mentioned it. He went on to get his master's, but it didn't say that he got it at Caltech, and his classmate was Frank Borman. And Frank Borman described Don Lopez as being technically brilliant, in addition to being humorous and affable and every other attribute that Don had. I mean, that's pretty significant. As people, I think, he went on to work as a propulsion engineer on the Gemini and Apollo projects. And then his tenure at the Smithsonian, both as a curator and as a deputy, he played an instrumental role in opening the Museum on the Mall and then subsequently the Stephen F. Varhazy Center at Dulles. So it really one museum, two locations. But he never thought of himself as a scholar or a writer, but he was very much all of that. And I would just close by saying he had the unique position of having made the history and then lived in roles to tell those. I mean, it was just a remarkable career.
Warren, what's it like? Bruce, go ahead.
I was just going to add that, say that from my standpoint, it's the next steps is continuing to share this plane and use it as a catalyst for telling the stories. Because I mean, we've hit upon it a couple of times here that Don was a great example of somebody who had these opportunities put in front of him, and he made the most of them. And that whole spirit of a kind of guy that can go over there and sit in the jungles of Burma and go up against the Japanese and go on to come back and have the kind of career he did, make the contribution he did, is, I think inspiring to, and can and should be inspiring to the youth of today. And if getting them in front of those stories is the fish hook, then that's what this plane is used for, to keep using Don's story as an example of what's possible for the kids today.
Warren, how often do we hear that veterans of not just World War II, but all these conflicts, just come home and clam up and don't tell the stories? How important now to see if we can educate, inform, and make people aware?
I think it's important that we learn from our past mistakes and understand what our current veterans are going through, for one thing. And I think that it's, from the Revolutionary War on for this country, we have all of our veterans to thank for the time that they've spent protecting our freedoms and continue to do so. Again, and I said this yesterday, but it's my soapbox. That's really what this is about: is honoring, educating through entertainment, and we need to recognize the stories about families who went their entire life, wives who were married to servicemen from World War II who never heard a story in 40 years until these artifacts came out. I used your word.
I know it's hard.
Yeah,
I'm still not used to
or
it.
I can think of numerous times in the time that I've been around them where you watch the transformation of a 70 or 80-year-old man as he sits in the cockpit and grabs the throttle and turns into an 18-year-old and starts telling you what's wrong with your restoration, because the clock wasn't there, the clock was there. You know, I mean, their memories are so vivid sometimes about what they did or what they flew, and then the stories come out, and you start hearing families, sons, daughters, wives coming out. And we had no idea. We had no idea that Dad went through that. And maybe it helps. Maybe it helps the veteran heal, I would say. It helps the families and their friends understand some of the things that they've watched throughout their life. They see, maybe they can step back and go, wow, you know, I just had no idea. And unfortunately, I think some of that comes too late for a lot of people on both sides. And again, I go back to maybe that's something that we're learning right now, where we try to appreciate our veterans and let them know how much we honor and appreciate what they've done for us when we're back here at home, not going through that stuff, and help them get through what they've had to endure to do what they did.
Price they've made.
Yeah, and so that, you know, this airplane is. I look forward to a full circle thing of this airplane sitting in front of the Ozzie Center. I really do. I would love to see it sitting in front of the doors someday, and people will walk around and walk by the P-40 that's hanging there and look at this airplane, and because it would I don't know how to say it exactly, but it would be a really nice thing for me, because I had a chance to meet Don and be associated with him, and I think we built this airplane, again, to use Don as an example, but to honor Don's life and career and the people that lived similar lives and careers with him. And it's just, you know, it's an honor to be able to be part of this project with all the people that have been involved in it, and to bring it to this stage and be able to have it sit here so that people can look at it and maybe think about some of the stuff and maybe go home and read a book.
You know, we'll figure out how to make that connection.
You know,
I put you on the spot, Chris.
You didn't use the term PTSD,
I did not.
but it's obvious, I think, to many that term applied back a couple of hundred years ago. We just didn't call it the same thing. And that obviously refers to veterans of World War II, World War I, and right on up to the present day. Another, you know, reason for us to be more aware, who have not had that experience, as you described beautifully. One thing, talking here with Chris, what we didn't say in the introduction, Chris, the backseater in the Tomcat, has over 300 carrier landings. He's an aviator in the F-14 Tomcat. How much does that experience of yours, of you know, with those hours in the Tomcat, affect your ability to make what you do relevant at the Smithsonian?
I think it's huge. I mean, it allows me to appreciate at some level the history and what's involved behind the flying.
I would say the intensity.
Yeah.
I would say because you can relate to how intense those machines were when they were operating.
Well, a buddy of mine that I flew with, he has a T-28, and we've been scheming, trying to figure out how can we get an F-14 out here to Oshkosh. And I don't know that that's quite possible, because they've been going to the desert and getting destroyed because of the few that remain are in Iranian hands. But I would just also, if I could, David, add, you know, at the Smithsonian, we don't, by virtue of the nature of the collection, we don't have aircraft outside. Everything is inside. It's not flyable, obviously. It's obviously key and important part of the history and the storytelling. But what I think really the service, and I'll call it service, Bruce and Warren and the team that you and other colleagues here at Oshkosh do, is bring to life so that we can hear, we can see these things fly and give it a living history. So it's a great relationship, and just personally want to thank you, Bruce, for making this possible.
Thank you. It's a privilege. Yeah. And for your venture for making it happen too.
So, Bruce, what's your project now, besides, because I know you're not going to sit on
The F-14, I think, right?
You hope. No, we've got, working with Air Corps, well along in the restoration of a P-47 Thunderbolt that got pulled off the side of a mountain in Papua New Guinea that was shot down during the war in the South Pacific. And so that'll be the next project that's going to be coming out here in the next couple of years. And hopefully it'll be on this platform.
Warren, what's it mean to you to fly this airplane?
First off,
With all the memories,
I want to say this is a great platform to put people on the spot. It's going to be done in a couple of years now, and you're going to let us come to that.
Absolutely. You're good.
It's really hard for me to describe, and I hate to repeat stuff that I said yesterday, but it's kind of a common deal. I painted a picture of a Mustang in a wall in my bedroom when I was 10, and I started dreaming. And, to be involved with the people, the restoration, and then I test flew the airplane, and all these guys had to stand there biting their fingernails going, man, I hope you don't screw up, I hope you don't. And I was doing the same thing. But to go out there, obviously when you get in that position, you're all done thinking about anything except flying the airplane. That your job is to fly an airplane, and it becomes just an airplane. A beautiful, good performing airplane. But you can't spend too much time just reminiscing until you get comfortable in the airplane. When I picked the Spitfire up in 2015, I had read Battle of Britain books my whole life. I had heroes from that. It was such a conflict that was so black and white, so good and bad and everything else. And the airplane was a 74 mission vet. And I went through the same thing. I got comfortable in the airplanes for a couple of flights, and then I headed cross country in it. And I had a chance to sit there and reflect on the fact that there was Polish kids that flew this airplane that were chased out of their home country, and they sat in that seat, and this airplane hung onto that stick and looked over that nose. And I thought about it was transferred to the Free French and flew over Normandy Beach during the invasion. And you can't help but occasionally sit there and think, what feelings went through this cockpit from different people as they sat in here? How much fear, how much pride, how much anger, how much everything that went with that. They were sitting in this airplane, and the airplanes were built for a gruesome task. And then, they were built to be killing machines. But they're so beautiful when you look at them. Sometimes you kind of got to overlook that too, and think about the fact that they were coming out of an era of phenomenal progress in the world, but especially in aviation. The era from 1929 to 1939 saw so much change in airplanes, but there's still the artistic eye in the design. When you look at a P-51 or a Spitfire or a P-40, and you look at the things that they did to make them pretty, even though they were building the fighter, they were still building pretty airplanes. And that's kind of, I guess, some of the stuff when I'm sitting in the cockpit and have a time to reflect on it. I think about that and hope the oil pressure stays where it's supposed to.
Speaking of practical evolution of airplanes, I'm just curious, I'm sure there's a couple of people in the audience, so you've got a lot of hours in P-51D. How do you compare flying a P-51C to a P-51D?
Well, I don't have near as much time in this airplane as I do. This is a much slicker airplane. It's faster to the Razorback. The reason for the change was obvious. You can't see out of this airplane. And the British made a modification called the Malcolm Hood that helped that some, and then North America went on to do some mods on the airplane and included the bubble canopy, which I think you see all the way into the modern fighters today to give that 360-degree field of view so that you can keep track of what's going on in the arena of the fight. And this airplane's not good for that. But it's a really, really nice flying airplane. If you're not worried about getting shot down and having somebody behind you, it's perfect.
Bruce, what's Don's legacy? Don Lopez.
Well, I think I touched upon a little earlier that his legacy is an example of if we approach our problems from looking at them from the standpoint of viewing them as opportunities. Here's a guy, where he came from, what he did with it, and the career that he made and the contribution he made. We see that in so many of these vets that went on, came out of prior to the war. Really, these guys came out of the Depression and so on, and came back to this country after the war and made this country. and they just went ahead and created something. And Don is a prime example of that. And that, I think, is his legacy, and one that I think that we can all take heart in and take inspiration from.
And Chris, how much responsibility does that put on your back as Deputy Director of Smithsonian to make a lot of these things happen?
Well, I would not in a moment try to compare myself to Don. I think he had a remarkable life, a remarkable person, but in a humble way will try to carry on that tradition, a tradition of excellence, hard work, and he really was quite humorous. I mean, even in spite of it all, he never lost his perspective and his grounding. And we were talking earlier about, gas or lack of in the CBI. And remember, he was asked a question. He said, by General Daly actually, he said, how did you get around? How did you navigate? And there was a long pause. Don kind of tilted his head and thought, he said, come to think of it, I don't know how we got to where we needed to go. But he would give you that sense of, it would be a little bit misleading because he was very polished and very accomplished at what he did. As I said, he went on to become an engineer with the Apollo program. He was a scholar. He wrote several books. I've not written a book. Don't know if that's in the works, but certainly take to heart the lessons and the standards of excellence that he has set for myself and others to follow. So it truly is a privilege and honor to be able to even associate myself in my current role with such a great American hero.
You mentioned it, yeah, Warren.
Well, we had an opportunity a few years ago, and Chris took us through the Hazy Center and gave us a tour, and I feel very confident that they're doing a great job of carrying on both facilities. The downtown facility is going through a major renovation right now, but they're keeping half of it open so that people can still visit it, because I think it's still the most visited museum in the world. Right?
Absolutely,
And,
over 8 million people a year.
Yeah, and the Hazy Center and the restoration facility there, and the openness that they have to work with other restorers and help other restorers, definitely the organization is carrying on its duty, its commitment, and its willingness to help, and that's really encouraging to see from your organization.
You just mentioned about Don, about humor. To what extent does the way the federal government operates allow you to use humor in your presentation?
Well, there are a couple stories I'd love to tell.
Yeah.
I know we're being filmed, so I probably will forego some of them out here. But no, things are a little bit more constrained, I suppose, in a way. But I do think as we go through challenges, whatever they may be, that we not lose our perspective and our sense of humor, and it really is important. I mean, we are rebuilding the entire museum on the wall. It's a massive program.
Do explain that for everybody here, for those listening.
Well, again, as you know, the Smithsonian is a nation's museum. It was built and opened in 1976, and Don was serving at the museum at that time with Mike Collins, who was the director. And after 40 years, it's shown its age, and to sort of equate what that level of visitorship means, imagine yourself living in a 2,500 square foot home and having 148 people over for dinner every night for 40 years. What would your house look like? Well, the museum is worn out, and we literally have to take the stone off the outside, replace it with longer duration stone, and to do that means emptying the galleries and everything inside the museum. It's actually a $650 million funded program by the government. But the real touch point are the galleries themselves, 23, all of which are going to be redone, and that is reliant on private philanthropy. So that's a lot of what we're about, is trying to engage with our supporters to help us tell these stories with these aircraft and artifacts in a way that goes the next 100 years. And the generation, as noted, coming through our doors today is different than the generation 40 years ago. So we have to remain contemporary and tell these stories in a way that is every bit as impactful and as meaningful, but in ways that resonate. Most of what we do is trying to well, educate. My email address is si.edu. We are educators, and as such, one of the things we're very hard working towards, and mindful of, is the developing the workforce for the aerospace industry. How do we get people energized at a young age and continue with that interest so that they can be the mechanics, the pilots, the designers, the engineers that this industry desperately needs. And so whether it's telling the story in a very visual, impactful way that can create that spark, or having a museum where we try to do that, we're all in this together, and we really see ourselves as educators and storytellers for the next generation.
And importantly, Warren referred to it, you will not completely close the museum while you're doing all this, right?
No,
People should understand
it makes
that.
it a longer project. It's basically 2-3 year projects because we're doing a half at a time. And if you were to visit the mall today, just about half of our museum is closed, and we had to move everything out to our restoration facility at Dulles and build facilities for that. And I don't need to tell this crowd, but our artifacts are not flat paintings typically. They're very large aircraft, and so we have to disassemble these aircraft and take them to our facilities at Dulles, where they'll undergo additional restoration. Most of them be reintroduced back into the galleries as we reopen. But at any time, we'll always have the Spirit of St. Louis, the Wright Flyer, on display. So we would certainly encourage you to come by. We will remain open. And as Warren and Lucy noted, Udvar Hazy is its own immense facility, and that remains fully open and operational.
One last question. As you look at this airplane, there are a couple of odd-looking things hanging below the wings. What are they, and what is their purpose?
Is there anybody here that doesn't recognize a keg of beer? So there's some great stories online. One of the easy places to look it up is called Beer Barrel Bombers. But after D-Day, they initiated a program, the British did initially with Spitfires, hauling beer in cleaned out drop tanks over to the troops on the front lines. And if you think about it, beer, especially in England, was kind of a staple. And it's also it's sanitized water. It was a little bit of nourishment, a little bit of courage, and bringing a little bit of home. It was a morale builder. So they were hauling beer in there, but the troops, although they were more than willing to drink it all, did complain of a little bit of residual fuel taste in the beer. So then they converted over and started actually hauling kegs of beer, wooden casks, and they would haul them like this, or they would even build. They would take the tips, the backside of drop tanks, and streamline them a little bit by putting them on there. But there's pictures of Spitfires, Typhoons, and Mustangs hauling wood beer casks. So we've replicated that by taking some modern kegs, filled them with root beer, which we're going to offer everybody a glass of root beer that wants one afterwards, courtesy of
Tap it off the wing.
Dakota Territory Air Museum and Warbirds in Review and Air Corps. We're kind of bringing this to people and ask you if you want to stick around and have a beer off of the pylon of a Mustang. This is your opportunity to do so. But it's a really unique story, and they actually hauled so much beer out of England that they had to taper it off because they were running low on beer in England. And I think it's an awesome thing.
But it's another reflection of the depth of honesty and specificity to restoring these airplanes 100% accurately. Right? Gentlemen, thank you very much. To Warren and Bruce and Chris, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Now welcome please Sam Bass, who is, how many, 6,000 hours of pilot time? Is that close enough, Sam? 35, and 50 years of safe flying as well. Sam, you're wrong to talk to the guy.
Yeah, and I'll let Warren, would you get up and just let's talk about the P-51 for a little bit, if you will. And well, you can sit, you can lay down if you like. But anyway, let's just go over and stand in front of this hope here, and tell me just about the P-51 itself, the whole design. What was the design purpose for the P-51?
Again, the British government are the ones that came to North America and asked for an airplane to be designed. I believe the U.S. government initially came and asked them to build airplanes under contract. And I'd love to have these guys jump in here if I'm saying something wrong, but they wanted to build, the government wanted North American to build P-40s under license. And North American said, I think we can do something quicker and better. And the British government contract with North America, and they drew some up on a napkin and were able to fly the airplane within 120 days, which was remarkable. And they obviously stepped away from the old thought process of everything being round and difficult to build, and said, we're going to throw away all the French curves and take the rulers out and start drawing straight lines and build a fast to build simpler airplane. But in doing so, they designed one of the most iconic and beautiful airframes ever designed. The A model Mustang, which there's the EA has an example over here in the A36, initially came out with the Allison engine, and it was, I think, a really good airplane, but the Allison didn't have the high altitude capability that the Rolls-Royce Merlin did. So the British modified an airplane, correct? Then they put the Merlin on the front of an A model airframe, basically, and decided, well, this could really be something. So North America went back and they started to build a P-51 B and C, which are the same airplane, just built in different factories, one in California, one in Texas. And they built that airplane, as you see it here, the Razorback version or whatever, with the birdcage canopy and things. And as the airplane evolved, it became the long-range fighter escort. It was, and I don't think a lot of people realize how extensively it was used in the Pacific theater. You know, it wasn't just the ETO where they went to Germany with it, but they were using it to get all the way to Japan to escort the B-29s at the end of the war. With the external tanks, the aft tank and the fuselage and the internal fuel, the airplane had an unbelievable duration. I know that our guy from North Dakota told me a few times that he was on 8-hour missions where they would leave England, fly a mission, and go through, as they exited the mission, end up over in Russia or someplace, you know, with the airplane to get fuel and come back, which is, at this age, I can't imagine sitting for 8 hours in a Mustang. I think that would hurt a lot, but pretty remarkable airplane.
What kind of armor did it normally carry?
Well, this airplane had 4 50 caliber machine guns, 2 in each wing. The A-36 was basically a ground attack airplane and had 2 nose guns and 3 guns in each wing. The D model Mustang with the canopy on it ended up having 3 50 calibers in each wing and the ability to carry a 500-pound bomb or a keg of beer on each wing.
But what is it, 300 and some odd right now that are still existing of A, B, C, and D, I guess.
How many Mustangs are existing?
Yeah. All right, well, how many Bs and Cs are available?
7.
I don't know what's wrong with the right here.
I can be his repeater.
Yeah. You said how many?
7.
7, okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's it's a beautiful airplane, and you just a little bit of the history of where the airplane came from. This particular airplane came from.
This airframe was this is the Wapton airplane, right, from the tech school. It was a post-war airplane given to a tech school in Wapton, North Dakota, and it resided there as an instructional aid, and it was recovered by Bob May. I'm trying to think of what year it would have been, in the 90s, I guess, and the restoration was begun on it. And then Bruce entered on the scene, and he and Bob made a deal, and Bruce brought the airplane to Air Corps, and they finished the restoration on it from there.
How long did it take for the restoration?
4 years.
About 4 years?
Two years of full-on restoration. Of course, when we started project, the first few years are a lot of research and starting components and small things like that. And then we did the whole crew on restoration full-time once things had developed. So.
What years would Don Lopez been flying this airplane?
43, 44, I think was when he was over there.
Yes, sir.
I wonder about parts. To what extent do you have to re-engineer a lot of assemblies, parts, or whatever in the airplane, since they're not available?
Right, yeah, we have that question a lot. You don't just call up North American or look in the avionics catalog for your parts. So we of course, we do, we're always searching the world and inventories for parts and components, but if we can't find them, we have to make them.
we're very fortunate where we have the North American drawings and a lot of engineering data, and we're continually on that search for more information to make we don't re-engineer components, but we remanufacture components to the original specifications, and we're always very careful about making things.
At your young age, how did you get started in restoring aircraft?
Well, I was just speaking to someone earlier. This is my 25th year at Oshkosh Air Venture. Had some friends of family bring me here in a car. We camped in Warbird camping and in our tents, and I ran into him last week. But it started here. It started with growing up on a farm. My family, my older brother, graduated from the Air Force Academy and was an inspiration in aviation. And it's a dream. Warren talked about it a little bit earlier.
Were you potty trained by the time you got here?
Barely. Yeah, just absolute passion for aviation, passion for airplanes. You know, when you have an interest in aircraft, there's always a center point around World War II because of so much happening at that point. And then you start to learn the stories of World War II and you bring them together. So just a lot of passion. I'm living my dream job, right? So it's pretty exciting. A lot starts here.
Are you able to talk about your recent find of drawings?
Well, again, I'm touching on researching. We do a lot of research, and we're always looking for people who have information. And we found a fellow who worked at North American Aviation and was involved with lofting information. That was his job, and very interested in the P-51 and World War II aircraft, and he saved some pretty neat information, and some of that is original drawings from North American. And so that's part of, for us, it's much more than just building an airplane and making an airplane go fly fast and sound cool. You know, there's so much, and that's the story of often the pilots flying these airplanes get to tell the story of the pilots. And Don was obviously a pilot, but also an engineer. And when we restore these airplanes, that's why we put so much attention into the detail, because there's so many stories with the home front and fabricating and building airplanes and the design and the engineering. I mean, you think about that. That's, you know, the pilots love the P-51, so do the mechanics. And when I kind of tell people the story of the P-51, I often kind of think about North American during World War II. When World War II broke out, they were a young, new company, and they were thinking way outside of the box. And it really shows in the engineering, because they not only built an airplane that flies awesome, but it was easy to build and easy to maintain. And when you hit those three things, it's phenomenal. You know, you can see, we can all think of several airframes like that flying, and out here where they really hit the mark. And so, interesting part. We love to tell that story and those stories of the details through the restoration.
Bruce, I believe that you have a presentation that you wanted to
Yes.
give right now.
Yes, I do. It gives me actually a great honor to share with Chris in the Smithsonian, a very talented aviation illustrator. Chad, is he here? Did a rendition of Loeb Soap right here, flying over. Chad, where are you? Oh, there you are. Flying over the China Burma.
Wow.
And we'd love to have you guys have that. Hopefully it will hang in a place of honor.
Wow. Well, thank you, Bruce. As a deputy director, I don't usually have the occasion of approving directly accession of artifacts into our collection, but I will certainly take this opportunity to add this to the nation's collection in honor of Don Lopez and the work you've done to commemorate his great service.
Thank you much. We'd also like to leave one of these for the wonderful Warbirds of America group and see if they still got any space on their wall in there.
I'm sure they'll find a place.
Good. Thank you much.
Good. Thank you so much.
I want to thank all you folks for coming. We have some coins here where she's going to see the little lady walking across with the red thing. It's a challenge coin. For you people that don't know what a challenge coin is, this is for our veterans that are in the audience. The challenge coin is once you receive one, if another veteran comes up and challenges you for your coin, and you don't have that coin, then you got to buy the beer. So that's what it's all about. But it's anyway, we have these, and these been furnished by the Fagan World War II Fighter Museum in Granite Falls. And this also, I'd like to thank the FlyingTV.com for their support in these. Thank you very much for coming, folks. Hello. Don't forget your root beer, folks.
Chuck Craven. Sorry, and I love that. Can I use hand in my